Hola a todos, muy buenas noches. Baruch Hashem, un domingo más de inspiración, un placer tenerlos aquí. En Share en historias impresionantes. Bueno, como siempre, primero que nada agradeciendo a Boreolam por la oportunidad, al equipo de Share Linda Holtz, Rababra Mades y toda la gente que está detrás de todo esto. Quiero dar un agradecimiento especial a Alegría Saba, que Baruch Hashem nos consiguió esta historia increíble. La verdad, se movió. Me están diciendo que no se escucha. ¿No se escucha? ¿Sí se oye? Ok, ya. Bueno, quiero dar un agradecimiento muy especial a nuestra querida traductora Yvette Levy. Nos podemos dar cuenta de lo especial que es. Es esposa de Elias Levy, el de Gamsum Letová. Imagínense, Baruch Hashem, qué familia tan especial, quien cada vez que nos traduce lo hace por Gesed. Baruch Hashem lo hace invirtiendo su tiempo, sin pedir que se le pague nada. Muchísimas gracias, Ivette, de verdad, muchas gracias. Para la gente que no sabe cómo es la traducción, en la computadora del lado derecho, hasta abajo del lado derecho hay un mundito en donde dice interpretación, le dan clic ahí y escogen español. El que está en celular, salen 3 puntitos hasta abajo del lado derecho, 3 puntitos en donde dice más, y ahí es igual, escogen español. Ahora voy a hablar en inglés. Ya saben que no soy perfecta en inglés, pero hago mi mejor esfuerzo para agradecer a nuestra protagonista. Well, Tova, we are really excited to have you here with us. Your story is completely amazing, and I'm sure you're gonna move our hearts and you're gonna get us so close to Hashem. So it's a really big merit for us to have you here. Thank you for your time, and we're all yours. Thank you so much. Your microphone, it's
sorry.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so I just want to say hi to everyone and thank you so much for inviting me. And it really is a pleasure and an honor to address so many Jews from South America. And thank you, Linda, for arranging all of this. So, yeah, as Linda said, I was born into quite an unusual situation. But Baruch Hashem, thank God, I had my journey and finally arrived home. So my parents both passed away now. They were married for 60 years. My mother was a Sephardic Jewess who was born and raised in Alexandria in Egypt. And my father was born in England. Eventually, he became an evangelical minister. When it was the Second World War broke out, my father was just 16 years old. He was raised in a small town, little village in England, and working on a farm, living on a farm. So he decided at 16 that it would be an adventure to go to war. So without telling anyone, he downed his tools, signed up, and he was fighting in frontline combat for the entire duration of the Second World War. For 2.5 of those years, he was stationed in North Africa, fighting the German Rommel and the German army over there. Now, the place where the huge battle was Al Alamein, I'm sure everyone knows, and this is between 2 cities, Cairo and Alexandria. So my Jewish family, they originated in Spain. As we know, there was the expulsion in the 1490s, and they fled to Italy. They were in Italy for 200 years, and then they were expelled again, the Jews, and they hopped over to the west coast of Greece to Corfu. It was in the 1890s that there was a blood libel in Corfu and in Zakynthos, and they hopped over to, part of the Jews went to Istanbul in Turkey, and part of the community went to Egypt and to Alexandria. And that's how my mother became to be born in Alexandria. She was never given, the family was never given Egyptian citizenship. So none of the Jews were given Egyptian citizenship at that time. So what happened was my grandparents, both of my Jewish grandparents, knew 10 languages fluently. Those who knew my grandmother was amazed that she was never born and raised in England her entire life. She spoke such a perfect and beautiful English. So consequently, there in Alexandria, there was a very prestigious school for boys run by the Salvation Army, St. Andrew's School. It was a Christian school. And so they hired my grandmother to teach English in the school. Unbeknownst to her, they hired the deputy headmistress to befriend the Jewish school teacher in an effort to convert her. Now, my mother is the eldest of 10 children. Next was born my Uncle Solomon. Then, unfortunately, the next 7 children born to my grandparents, even though they were each born alive, even though some of them lived for, my mom said, a few months, some of them for 1 or 2 years, and one little girl lived to be almost 4. But for reasons best known to God, each of these children passed away. When my grandmother was carrying the 10th child, the rabbi in Alexandria suggested, do not prepare anything for the unborn baby. It shouldn't be an evil eye, an ayin hara. When the child was born and he was a boy, the rabbi again suggested, call his name Chaim. They called him Chaim Shmuel, and my grandfather took upon himself a vow that if this child would live, he would fast every Monday and Thursday for the duration of his life. I tell this story because this uncle did survive, and he told me that, and my grandfather died at 85 years old, and until my grandfather passed away, he always fasted every Monday and Thursday. And you will hear as I progress with my story how this uncle, this child, played a very, very important role in my return home, thanks to God. So yes, so it was during the war, and my father was raised a Christian boy. And what happened was the headmaster of the school, he was from Scotland, and the school where my grandmother worked, he was very charismatic, and he opened the schoolrooms in the evenings for the servicemen, those serving in the British Army and Allied forces and everyone, that they would be able to come and to get strengthened emotionally and spiritually during these difficult war years. So my father was one of the soldiers who used to frequent General Troops mission school and services. So eventually, my uncle, I have to tell you, was adamant that he used to tell me all the time, Tony, you should know that your grandmother was not a wicked woman. Why do I say that? Because maybe given to the stress of this so-called friendship from the deputy headmistress in the school where my grandmother worked for over 25 years, maybe due to the stress, emotionally and physical stress of bringing all these children into the world and unfortunately laying them to rest. And thirdly, my uncle told me, Tony, we were so poor. I'm embarrassed to tell you how poor we were.
Sorry, Nova,
So given the
sorry, I'm so sorry. Can you go a little bit slower? So we can
speak
understand better?
slowly?
Yes, please, a little bit slower, please.
Yes, no problem. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry.
Sorry. I was trying to get a lot of story in for you, so I was speaking more quickly. Definitely can speak more slowly. Yes. So I think given these 3 difficult situations for my grandmother, unfortunately, when my mother was almost 21 years old, my grandmother converted to Christianity there in Alexandria, and she influenced my mother to do the same. My grandfather was quite religious, He was so devastated with this turn of events. Not only had he buried 7 of his children, now his wife and his only daughter had chosen to make this drastic step and change in their lives. My grandfather sat Shiva for my grandmother and my mother, and they lived separately after those years. So 1 second, sorry. It was only after that my parents met. Where did they meet? In the headmaster's services in the school. They became engaged, and my father promised to my mother that when the war ended, he would send her a ticket to England where they could marry. This took another 3.5 years. Once the Allied soldiers were successful in Al Alamein, they went through Palestine and then into Europe and liberating the camps. My father was one of the soldiers, the Allied soldiers who liberated the Bergen-Belsen camp, and finally into England. It was only in October 1946 that my mother boarded a boat. It took her 6 weeks to get from Alexandria in Egypt to Southampton in England. When she arrived, in order to marry my father in church, she needed to be baptized. She was baptized and she married my father. My father felt there must be a reason. Why did God spare his life and not the lives of many of his friends? He decided to dedicate his entire life to God, and he became a preacher. By the time my father's congregation was established and he was ordained, my parents had 4 children, and this was their planned family. My father was given a congregation in a small town in England called Loughborough in Leicestershire. There is no synagogue. There are no Jews. This was their planned family. It was only several years later, almost 6 years later, that my mother realized she was having another baby. My father told her, "Do not worry, this will be a boy. We will call his name Andrew, and he will be the big evangelist, the big preacher that the world is looking for." So you can see, I was quite a disappointment, and no one had a name for me. Now, my Jewish grandmother, she unfortunately died of cancer very young in Egypt at the age of only 46. Her Jewish name was Tova. And my mother wanted to call the younger of the older children Tonika, after Tova, Tonika, after her mother. And my father said, "No, we are in England and this is a foreign name. We must give her a Christian name." My sister was called Margaret Grace. When I came along, my mother was adamant, "This one will be after my mother." And so I was called Tonika, as my mother said was the English way to say Tova. By the time I was born, my father's congregation was well established. We went to church almost every night of the week, twice on Saturdays and 3 times on Sundays. Because my father was the preacher, so our home was always an open home, and we had people coming over all of the time. It's interesting and important, I feel, to stress that my father never asked for support with the church. My father kept a full-time job. He held a managerial position in an engineering company in the town, and he volunteered his time with the church and volunteered all of his services. He never took a salary, and on top, he supported many, many people in the congregation. So I grew up from a very early age. We had no television, no radio, no newspapers. I went to very strict Christian schools. I was not allowed to read secular literature. I was raised in a very strict Christian environment, but it's very important to understand that I was a very happy child. I was very proud of my parents. I was very proud of my father. And as he strove to commit his life to God and to serve God in a completely, fully, like total way, so I, as a young child, was inspired and wanted to emulate him and to also become close to God and to give my life to God and to serve him. So this was a very natural thing for me. My father had a very close friend who he'd gone through the war with. He had a congregation in the big city of Nottingham. When I was about 12, he opened a theological college and to take in young people and train them how to work. Now, the head, my father's friend, we called him Uncle Peter, even though he was a big, important preacher and he was the head and the dean of this theological college. To me, he was always Uncle Peter. So in my school holidays, as I was growing up and becoming a teenager, every year I would go to the college and volunteer my services. And it was a very interesting and amazing place for me. So by the time I was just 16, he suggested to my father, why wait until Tony is 18? It's a waste. I'll take her at 16. She can finish her secular education with me, and she can also begin her spiritual training. I really feel that she's ready. Okay, I want you to know it's very, very important to understand that my father did not coerce me in any way. In fact, when my father drove me over to the big city of Nottingham, and the college was a beautiful college, like a Victorian mansion surrounded by very, very pretty English gardens, at a high wall and a huge iron gate. So when we were sitting outside, my father looked at me in the car and he said, are you sure you want to do this? You can change your mind. You can come back home with mommy and me. You don't have to feel that you must make this decision now at this time in your life. And I remember I said to my father, Daddy, I am ready. He said, all right, I will take you in. That was the last time that I really had personal time with my father, with my parents. I was not, there were very strict rules in the college. It was rather like a convent. We had no money. We had no holidays. The only time I saw my parents was in national or international conventions. I never again returned home to my parents' home. I soon realized that being a student in the college was very different than volunteering in my school holidays. But I was very, very focused on the program. We were given a book of rules. The first rule was that we had to be obedient to those in authority over us. It did not matter what they told us to do, no matter how humiliating or embarrassing, we had to instantly do it and without question. This was in order to break down any sense of pride or dignity or self-esteem. It was to humble us. We had to eat anything that was put in front of us. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the food was not good. We had a very, very good cook in the college. She was from Hungary and she made the most delicious food. But sometimes she would be ordered to burn it and we had to eat it. at least once a week, we had to eat moldy bread. This was in order to train us that food was not to derive pleasure from. It was merely to satiate our hunger and to give us energy. We also had to fast a lot. We had to fast one day every week for 24 hours. We were encouraged to fast 2 separate days. And throughout the year, sometimes the principal would call upon the entire college to fast together for 3 consecutive days, sometimes 5 days, and once every year for an entire week. Now you can ask, how on earth could I be standing here and speaking to you? That's impossible. By the time we have finished with Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av, we are really, really depleted. Well, that is true. When we were doing the 24-hour fast, we were not allowed to have fluid or any sustenance whatsoever. When we were doing the long fast, 3 days, 5 days, or 1 week, the longest fast I ever did was 8 days, we were allowed to have what we called milk and water. Milk and water was rather like an English cup of tea, but without the tea. So it was a small amount of milk in the bottom of a teacup, a small teaspoon of sugar, and you filled the cup with boiling water. We were allowed to drink as many of this milk and water as we wanted throughout the days of the long fast. So that's actually what Sustain does throughout this time. The principal, why did we have to do this? Because the principal believed that unless a person's spirit was broken, unless they were disattached from the materialistic world completely and all of their natural desires, they would never be of use to God. So all of this program was in order to help us to cut ourselves away from any desires, lust, pleasure, or the physical world completely, and enter into a world of spirituality. I know it sounds crazy, but I liked it in the college. I was very focused and very excited with this program. For the first time, I thought, whoa, this is what I really have to do in order to be close to God. And I wanted to be as close to God as was humanly possible. Then I felt that I would be able to make a greater contribution to society. I would make this world a better and kinder place by living a life of spirituality. So I really, really loved it, and I adjusted very quickly. I was extremely focused and very, very happy. After I was there a couple of years, one of my elder sisters, actually the younger one of the four, my sister Margaret, she arrived in the college to begin her training. She had only been there a month, and she was put in a completely different wing, completely different responsibilities. And even though she'd been there a month, we'd hardly seen each other. This one day, we happened to be in the evening in the queue, in the line for dinner. We were inching our way forward in the dining room, and she whispered to me, "Hey, do you know what day it was today?" I said, "No, Margaret. It was for us a regular, ordinary day. It was a Wednesday." I said, "What was so important about this Wednesday?" She whispered, "It was Yom Kippur." Now, it's very, very important to understand that my mother never spoke one word ever of anything Jewish. She never spoke about her life in Alexandria, only after her conversion. I'm embarrassed to tell you that I did not know the most basic things of a Jewish life. I didn't know that even the Shabbat started on Friday night and finished on Motzei Shabbos. I had no idea of Shabbat candles. I'd never heard of Shabbat candles. I'd never heard of shofar, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. I'd never heard of Pesach or matzah. I did hear a little of Yom Kippur. All we knew was that this was the day that the Jews fasted. And we always were educated, poor Jews, they only have one day to ask God to forgive them their sins. This is, of course, not correct, but this is what I was taught growing up. So now we're in the line and I'm in the college and we're chatting and she tells me it's Yom Kippur. And I looked at her and I said, Margaret, how do you know that? She said she was at work and she saw all the Jews going to the synagogue and she couldn't understand why were the Jews going to the synagogue in the middle of the week. She decided there must be a war. Something terrible must have happened in Israel. She said, I wanted to see if Mummy's family was all right. So in my lunch break, I decided to go in and I asked them, why are you all in the synagogue on Wednesday? Is there a war? Did something terrible happen? They told her, no, don't worry. Everything is fine. Today is Yom Kippur. Okay, she said, thank you very much. That's all she needed to know. She went back to work. She ate her sandwiches, continued her work, and came home and told me. I was so flabbergasted. As I mentioned, I was in the city of Nottingham for 2 years. It didn't even occur to me to think about a Jew or a synagogue. Another thing that's very important to understand is that the Christians go through the father. The fact that my mother was a Jew held no weight in our home whatsoever. So I was raised totally according to the Christian Bible and the Christian God, that we children were not Jewish. We never even gave it another thought. The only thing I thought I knew about a Jew was that they had dark skin and black hair. That's what my mother looked like. My father was as white and blonde as anyone could be, and my mom was typical Sephardic. So I look at my sister and she's the same coloring as myself. And I said, Margaret, didn't they look at you and say that you're a Gentile? She said, no, first of all, there were crowds of people there. She said, you can't believe how many Jews there are in this city. And I told her, synagogue, where's the synagogue? She told me, you don't know? It's a 5-minute walk only away from the college. She said, if you're so interested, why don't you go and have a look sometime? No one will bother you. We quickly ate our dinner and we went on our way. She went her way, me to mine. We had to prepare our souls for the evening service. I will never forget that day. My roommate had not yet come up from dinner. I was in the room alone. I was just tidying up and putting a few things in its places. All of a sudden, all I could think was, it was Yom Kippur. All the Jews were in synagogue and you weren't there. Together with these words that seemed to spring from nowhere in my mind, it like released in the very gut of my being such a deep feeling of sadness. It was almost like this depression descended on me. So much so, I remember literally clenching my fists and making my arms rigid by my side. And with all the strength I could muster inside of myself, in my mind, I told myself, so what? So what if all the Jews were in synagogue and I wasn't there? I wasn't supposed to be there. And what on earth have the Jews got to do with me? try as I might, no matter how hard I tried to push these words out of my head and these feelings away from me, it seemed to hammer me back even harder. Now, I was only 18, and I thought this was so strange and so weird that I for sure didn't even tell anyone. I didn't even tell my best friend in the college. I didn't tell my roommate. I didn't tell anyone. And as I remember, it took me a good couple of days to totally forget about it. And I was really extremely relieved. Now, we had two services on a Saturday. One was at 12 noon and one was at 7 in the evening. We we had free time on a Saturday morning. It was the only time in the week when we had free time. It wasn't free to do whatever we wanted. We had a special program that was Bible study, prayer, inner reflection, meditation. This was in order to prepare our souls for the weekend services and for the following week. It was a very individual time. As it was an individual time, it was actually an easy time to sneak away. This one Saturday morning, I tried to persuade my roommate, who of course was not Jewish, to come with me for a walk and let's go to the synagogue. I told her, come just for a few minutes, let's just have a peep. I really want to have a look at what a synagogue looks like inside. I want to know, how do Jews pray? She looked at me crazy. She told me, what? Are you crazy? I'm not going to the synagogue, she told me, and you shouldn't go there either. Don't go. I told her, come on, what could be the harm in it? We don't have to do anything. We don't have to say anything. Let's just have a peep in the door. Come on, please come with me. I'm so afraid to go by myself. She was insistent. No way. I do not want anything to do with this, and you should not go there. Don't go. Okay, I saw she was getting antsy. I didn't want her to snitch to the principal on me. I didn't want to get in trouble. I told her, okay, fine, no problem. I'm just going to do my time of devotion. I will be back. Of course, I knew where I was going to go. Well, it's important to understand that in the college, we were not allowed to wear contemporary dress. I looked on that day exactly like a Christian, a nun, a Catholic nun, and I was dressed completely in a dark brown, almost black, with the headpiece over here and down my shoulders with covered up to here, long robes to the floor, and none of our body shape was allowed to show. We had very stiff starch petticoats underneath, so I looked like straight down, more like a walking tree trunk than I did a human being. And my sister gave me very clear instructions of how to find the synagogue, but unfortunately she didn't tell me about upstairs and down. So when I walked into the synagogue and I find the doors, she told me you'll be in a big lobby and then there's more doors and that's where they pray. I walk in, I sat down in the men's section. So of course I hadn't been there more than a few moments, and all the prayers stopped, the davening, and everybody's turning around and they're staring at me. And it didn't occur to me that they're only men, because I never heard of such a concept of separate prayers for men and women. So anyway, they're staring and I'm looking and I don't know what I've done wrong, but finally this gentleman came over and he whispered very kindly, "I'm sorry, but you have to leave." Okay, I got up, go out, and this gentleman escorted me, and I looked at him and I said, "You honestly mean that I can't stay here?" He said, "All right, the women go upstairs." He showed me the door and off I went. Now my sister had gone on Yom Kippur. At the time of this time on Shabbat morning, there were only 3 ladies in the ladies section. They already had seen me enter. There was a banister and they could see down. So they'd seen me enter downstairs. When I got up, they were with their nose in their siddur, and nobody wanted to have anything to do with the Mashugana, with the crazy person that came into synagogue. And so they were continuing their prayers. Then I realized there's names on every seat. I couldn't find my name. But there was a pile of books on the window ledge, and I guess my curiosity got the better of me. I really, really wanted to understand, how did Jews pray, or just look a little bit. So what happened? We stood up, we sat down. We stood up, we sat down. It was all in Hebrew. I didn't know what on earth they were talking about. There was no choir, there was no music, there was no nothing. There were just some shuffles and bows and everything. And after just about 5-10 minutes, I put my little book back and I went running out of there and up the hill to the church back. And I said to myself, wow, no wonder my mother left. It's really as I was taught my entire life. It's just dead religion and ancient traditions and bondage, and there's nothing there for me. I threw myself into my life in the church, and by the time I was just 20, almost 21 years old, because I'd started my degree earlier, so I was ordained. My father was thrilled that his baby girl, even though I wasn't Andrew, but his baby girl had reached a higher height in the church than any of my older brothers and sisters, and at such a young age. So anyway, we had to take vows when I went to the college. And then when I was ordained, I had to renew those vows. What was my vow at less than 21 years old? That I would dedicate my entire life to the church, I would never marry, and I would serve God for the rest of my life. I was very excited with this. I thought this at almost 21 years old, that this was a wonderful thing to do with my life. About 6 months after my ordination, I received a letter from my mother. We were allowed just letters, no personal phone calls, but letters. So I received a letter. She said that her youngest brother, my Uncle Sam, was coming to England on holiday. Now, Uncle Sam, he knew that my grandfather, his father, had sat Shiva for my mother. But he wanted to see her. He hadn't seen her for many, many years. And he was in England. And not only did he want to see her, he wanted to see her children. So he asked that he could meet the children. And my mom explained that I live in a church. He said, no worries. Please tell her that I only want to see her for 10 minutes. Ask her, will she see her uncle from Israel in the gardens? I will not go into the church, but in the gardens, just so that I can meet my niece and she can meet her uncle from Israel. Okay, I was very, very excited. I didn't think that I ever would have the opportunity to meet any of my mom's family. So the fact that my uncle was making such a great effort to come and see me was something very, very special. When we were sitting together, just the two of us in the gardens, my uncle looked at me and he said, Tony, what are you doing here? What are you doing behind these high walls and wearing such dark clothes? He said, don't you know that God gave life to be lived, to be enjoyed? He said, come on, cheer up a little bit, laugh a little bit. He said, you know what? I will send you a ticket to Israel. Why don't you come and visit me? And said, you can come and live with me. He said, you'll just be like one of my own daughters in my home. I'll take care of all of your needs. I'll buy you anything at all that you want. Just come. I told him, Uncle, that's so kind of you, but it's too late. I have given my life to God. My uncle, being very Jewish, was not going to be put off with any of this nonsense. he starts to tell me everything he can think of about life here in Eretz Israel. He had fought, he came in 48, and he fought in all the wars, and he married a Sephardic wife. He was living in Kiryat Shmona, one of the pioneers. He said, we paved the roads, we planted the trees, and we fought, and Aunt Marie was side by side with me in the trenches, and we claimed the land. And he said, Tony, you must come. It's such an amazing place. And he told me, even if after 1 week, even if after a few days, you tell me, Uncle, I don't like it, I promise I will put you back on the plane. I'll send you right back. You don't have to worry. Finally, he sees that I'm not going to go. And he tells me, you know, Tony, I want to tell you the truth. Life in Israel, especially where I'm living in Kiryat Shmona, it's not so easy. We're surrounded by 2 hostile Arab countries from Syria and Lebanon, and the Katyusha rockets come raining down, and we have to take the children from their schools, from their beds, and run into the shelters as quickly as possible. We lose our water, we lose our electricity. Sometimes we have to stay in the shelters for a week at a time. It's very, very cramped. It's very inconvenient. He said, actually, my eldest daughter, that's your cousin Nomi, he told me, he's been living, she's married and she has little children. And she's been living also in Kiryat Shmona. But whilst I'm here in England on holiday, Nomi is moving to a calmer home further south. Nomi wants to raise her children in a calmer environment without all the time this whole upheaval of picking them out of their beds and rushing to shelters and being so inconvenienced and uncomfortable. He said, do you know what I'm looking forward to do? As soon as I get back to Eretz Israel, even before I go to my own home, I will visit Nomi in her new home, and I will put a mezuzah on the outside of her door. I asked him, Uncle, what's a mezuzah? I'd never heard of one and definitely never seen one. I explained it's a pretty box, and inside is a piece of parchment with part of the Jewish Bible handwritten on it by a scribe. He told me religious Jews have it on every door of their home, and they kiss it when they go in and out. Right before he left, he looked at me and he said, you know, Tony, okay, you're not going to come to Israel, but at least I want to send you something from Israel. Think about anything at all that you would like, and I will do my best to find it and send it to you. Okay, I thought for a few moments, and I said, you know what? I would like a mezuzah. What is this thing that you're going to put on your daughter's home that you're so excited about and will give you such great pleasure? Please, will you send this to me? Sure enough, about 10 days later, a small padded envelope arrived for me in the college. It was from my Uncle Sam. Usually all the mail was opened, but I guess as the principal saw that it was some present or something from my Uncle Sam, so I got it unopened. When I took it to my room, I was so excited. Inside was a full-size kosher mezuzah. Now, my uncle was not so religious. He was very, very traditional. He had a very strong Jewish identity. He loved being Jewish, and he loved Eretz Israel. But he didn't have too much patience with all the stuff that Jews, all the mitzvahs and things like that. So in his home also, he had little winsy-tinsy mezuzahs on his door. Honestly, he could have sent me a printed piece of paper. I never would have known the difference. But he went out and he purchased a full-size kosher mezuzah. He left the back open so I could see the mezuzah scroll inside. He drew a diagram as to which doorpost, how far up, at what angle, all the instructions of how to put the mezuzah on the door properly, so neatly, so perfectly. I remember holding the scroll in my hand, the mezuzah scroll, and thinking to myself, whoa, what are you supposed to do with it? Are you supposed to open it? But it seemed to be wrapped up so carefully. I thought I'd better not touch it. I put it back in its little box. That night after evening prayers, 10:30 at night, when we were not fasting, we were given a cup of hot cocoa. Instead of going into the dining room for my cocoa, I quickly ran down to the cellars of the church. I rummaged around. I managed to find a hammer and some nails. I ran immediately back to my room. I took my uncle's letter. I made sure to do everything just perfectly, and I banged the mezuzah on my door in the church. And my uncle told me, "You're supposed to kiss it." And I kissed it. All of a sudden, I got so afraid. I figured, whoa, I got so excited with this little thing. I forgot to ask permission first. And I remember thinking and looking at it, what could be wrong with it? It's only a piece of wood and it's only a piece of parchment. The only thing I could possibly have done wrong is that I forgot to ask. Okay, I took it down quickly. I figured I'll find the principal, and for sure he will say yes. It was about 11 o'clock at night when I found him, and I was very excited. And I said, "Look, my uncle sent me a mezuzah, and it's so pretty. Could I please put it up?" He didn't say anything. He put his hand out at arm's length, and I popped it in. He told me, "Just look at it, child." I said, "I'm looking at it. What's wrong with it?" He obviously didn't like it. Told me, "What's wrong with it? Tell me, what's nice about it?" Oh, I said, "Actually, what's nice about it is that my uncle sent it to me from Israel, and could I please put it up?" He said, "No, the Jews have this for superstitious reasons, and we don't believe in that kind of rubbish. No, you cannot put it up." He gave it to me back. In the entire universe, the only thing I had that was just mine was a little bedside cabinet with a tiny little drawer. I popped the mezuzah in the drawer. And I'll tell you the truth, I forgot about it. But I want us to think for one moment, where was I at that time in my life? Unfortunately, I was in a very dark, low, uncomfortable place for a Jewish soul. Did I know I had a Jewish soul at that time? No idea. I was devoted to Christianity, a good Christian girl, doing everything, excelling in all that I needed to do. But by divine providence, what came into my possession at that time in my life was a little kosher mezuzah with its eternal message that there is only one God. Because I put it in that little drawer, each night when I lay down to go to sleep, it was right next to my head. I totally forgot about it. I do not remember once taking that mezuzah out again and looking at it. Almost 3 years went by. One Saturday morning, and I'd grown tremendously in the church. I had a huge amount of responsibility. I was very, very loved and respected, very, very happy. This one Saturday morning, almost 3 years after my uncle gave me the mezuzah, I was out doing my morning devotions. I went past the synagogue. I must have gone past the synagogue during those years dozens of times. I did not think of it, look at it, or acknowledge it. I don't know why. I remember I walked past the synagogue. In my mind, my thoughts, I was in my Christian meditative thoughts and prayer and thinking of my Bible studies. But I stopped. I remember I don't even think that I thought, I don't remember that I thought I will go into the synagogue. I just retraced my steps, walked backwards 4 steps, and I went into the synagogue. It was a very spontaneous thing. I knew to go upstairs. I sat at the back. I'd only been there a couple of minutes, and the rabbi went to the front of the shul, to the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, and he took out the Torah scroll, and he held it and faced the congregation. And what does he say? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And the congregation repeats the words. I remember standing there and thinking to myself, whoa, that's really cute. All you have to do is copy what the rabbi says. And I remember thinking, even I could do that. I stayed only a few moments. I was worried. Maybe someone from the church had seen me enter or would see me exit. I quickly got back to the church. Now, as I mentioned, there was a roster on the college notice board that was posted every Friday evening with everyone's responsibilities in the services throughout the weekend and the following week. Sometimes you are not on the roster on the weekend, only the next week. So the next time I wasn't on the weekend services, I felt like I had a clear conscience. I decide, of course, I don't tell anyone, I will sneak out and I will go to the synagogue. I made sure to go exactly the time I had gone previously. I just wanted to see. Did the rabbi take out the scroll as a one-time occurrence, or did he do this every week? I got there 5-10 minutes early, a little bit early. I didn't want to miss. Sure enough, again, the rabbi took out the scroll. And again, he said Shema. And this time I was ready. And I tried as carefully as I could to repeat the words that the rabbi had said. There were no great feelings inside. I had no understanding of what I'd said, or even if I pronounced the words properly. But for the first time in my life, I was almost 24 years old, I acknowledged that there was one God. Again, I stayed a few moments and I quickly went back to the church. But the next time I was not on the weekend service, I was there in the synagogue, and again and again. And I always made sure to get there at this particular time so I could say these words. Slowly, slowly, what happened? What happened was that little Pintele Yid, that little Jewish neshama, the spark of a Jew that was buried so deeply inside, it started to wake up. Did I know there was such a thing? Absolutely not. I'd never heard of such a concept. But how did it make me feel? It awakened in the depths, the very gut of my being, a deep, deep longing just to be with Jews. That's all. I want to sit among Jews. I want to look at a Jew. I want to look at the rabbi. I want to look at the Torah. I want to hear the words of the Torah. Something in my soul was so drawn to this, and I couldn't understand why. And the more I went to the synagogue, the more I wanted to go. And I would stay a little longer and a little longer. And one day I was there in the synagogue, and all of a sudden I became so frightened. This Jewish business, as I came to understand it, this thirst and this longing in the guts of my being to connect with Jews would become so strong. It was like an addiction. And I would, in my prayers in the church, in the week, every morning, every day, I would be on my knees in the church and I would pray, dear God, please don't let me have to be on the weekend service, that I could have a clear conscience and I could sneak out to the synagogue for a few minutes. I felt so obsessed with synagogue that I became frightened. And I was standing there in the synagogue and I said to myself, what are you doing here? You are a good Christian girl. You are an ordained Christian minister. You preach at the pulpit. What are you doing in the synagogue? I told myself, take off these rose-colored glasses. This is dead religion. This is ancient traditions. This is bondage. What you have in the church, I told myself, is life and freedom. And that day I told myself, I am never coming to the synagogue again. I quickly ran out. I went to the church, ran straight into the church to the altar, and I knelt down and I started to sob hysterically and beg God to forgive me and help me to forget about Jews and to concentrate and be a good Christian minister. And I meant it so sincerely with all of my soul. And when we were served moldy bread, I ate more. And when we were served burnt food, I ate more. And I fasted more. And I did everything in my power that I could think of to help me to get rid of all of these Jewish thoughts and feelings out of my life that were becoming such a disturbance. But it was too late. My little neshama, my little Jewish soul had woken up, and it had no intention of going back to sleep. It was almost like for 24 years, my Jewish soul was in some kind of spiritual coma. And when I start to say Shema, it starts to get excited and it blinks its little neshama eyes and it gets really, really excited, but it for sure was not going to go to sleep again. And this intense longing would become so like just encompassing. That's the only way I could say it, would just encompass my own whole being, my emotion, my thoughts, everything, that I would sneak to the synagogue again. One day I stayed in the synagogue too late. I was late for our service back in the church. The principal called me into his office and he asked me very sternly, "Where were you?" I was afraid to tell a lie. I was taught that I told a lie, I would burn in hell forever. It didn't sound very exciting. So I said, I was just out for a walk. I was doing my morning devotions. And for some reason, I don't know why, I went into the synagogue and I just went for a few minutes to have a look. And I just forgot about the time. I didn't intend to stay so long. I'm so sorry. I just got interested in what was happening there. He thumped his hand down on his desk and he started to scream at me. "You what? I am telling you, child, you are a Gentile. God says you are a Gentile. The Bible says you are a Gentile. And you have to tell yourself every morning and every evening before you go to sleep 3 times, I am a Gentile. Do you understand?" I said, "Yes, I understand." He banned me from ever going to the synagogue again. and from having any contact whatsoever with a Jew. He changed my name. He said my name no longer would be Sister Tonica in the church. I would be Sister Joy. And the joy of the Christian God would permeate my being. And this was the answer to all of my problems. Okay, I had never heard him scream at anyone with such intensity and such anger in my entire life. And I thought to myself, this is what is wrong with me. I must tell myself every morning and every night that I'm a Gentile, and this Jewish business, wherever it's coming from, is going to get out of my life once and for all. So with all the sincerity within and determination, each morning I sat up in bed and I told myself over and over, I am a Gentile, I am a Gentile, I am a Gentile. And every night before I went to sleep, over and over in my mind, I fell asleep each night telling myself, I am a Gentile, I am a Gentile, I'm a Gentile. I wasn't able to go to the synagogue again. I was afraid and I never did return. But I never forgot. And Saturday morning, I would look at my watch and I would remind myself, now the rabbi's doing this. Now he's going to the Holy Ark. Now he's taking out the scroll. Now he's saying the words. But I was so frustrated with myself that I couldn't remember how to say the words. When words have no meaning and something has no meaning, it's very, very difficult to remember. And I couldn't remember the words. And I was very, very frustrated with myself about that. But I always remember the exact time that the rabbi and all the Jews in the synagogue would be saying the words, the Shema. It was almost a year later and I was sitting up in bed and I heard myself one day telling myself, you know, like it's over. I'm still saying I'm Gentile and I'm a Gentile. And that day I said to myself, who really cares? Just say, for some bizarre reason, I'm a Jew. So what? Why can't I just be a Jew and be a good Christian? Like, what's the contradiction here? I really had so far to go and I had no idea of anything, but I decided that day, whatever I am, and who cares anyway? And I'm not going to say this anymore. It was just a short while later, I was on the roster to preach the main sermon of the weekend services. I remember exactly, it could have been 1 minute ago. It's such a vivid memory in my mind. I remember exactly where I was standing in the church and I took down my Bibles and study books to prepare my sermon. I'd been in the college for over 8 years. Can you imagine how much fasting I'd done, how much moldy bread I'd eaten, how much burned food, how much I had tried and worked on myself to disattach myself from the physical world. And I had accomplished this. I definitely was in a realm of spirituality and I could enter into a spiritual energy quite easily. But it was very, very frustrating for me. I did not know that there is a vast difference between a Jew and a non-Jew. For a non-Jew, there is a level of spirituality in this world that God gives that we should have free choice. Even a non-Jew can tune into this level of spirituality. There are many monks, Buddhist monks, and people in ashrams and in mountains in the Himalayas and everywhere. I promise you, if you ask any one of those individuals, maybe they eat just one bowl of plain, unflavored rice every single day, and you ask them what makes you or what sparks you to be able to, you know, to live your life this way. Why would you want to live your life this way? I can promise you every single one of them will say, it makes me feel good. That's the difference between a non-Jew and a Jew. A non-Jew, in order to be able to feel his sense of completeness and his sense of fulfillment, he needs to feel good. Whether he goes into religion, whether he goes into the arts, whether he goes into sports, whatever, he needs to feel totally fulfilled. When he's reached his ultimate, he will feel fulfilled. A Jew, on the other hand, we need to connect with God in order to have that sense of completeness and fulfillment. We need to connect with God. And how does a Jew connect with God? Through Torah and through the performance of the mitzvot. Doesn't mean we have to do all the mitzvot. One little mitzvah will connect us with God. This gives us a sense of synchronization, body, soul, and mind, and brings us to this sense of completeness. But this day in the church, preparing my sermon, I felt I didn't know anything about this. I only know the Christian God. I only know the way I've been trained all my life to connect with him. But I know, if I am totally honest, I have not connected with the Christian God. And instead of feeling this deep sense of completeness and fulfillment, there is an unbelievable void in the gut of my being. I remember I prayed that day to the Christian God, and I said, I feel like I know everything there is to know about you. I understand everything there is to understand about you. But what else? I felt like I held God in my hand. And then I wondered to myself, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. How could I, an insignificant little person on earth, one of billions, say to God, I understand everything about you and I don't feel fulfilled? What else? For the first time in my life, I wondered, is there really a God? Or have I just been brainwashed all of my life? Who is my God that I could understand him? There's something wrong. I wondered, maybe I'm afraid of hell. Maybe I've been so heavily indoctrinated my entire life that if I don't believe all of this Christianity, I will burn in hell forever. I was obsessed with that as a child. I always used to ask my father, Daddy, how long is forever? And I remember I asked him one day, Daddy, what's the big deal about hell? So you burn and it's uncomfortable for a little time, but then you're consumed. So what's the big deal about it? No, he explained, the fires of hell, they will never consume you and you will burn forever. I was so petrified by that as a child. I remember when he gave me money to buy an ice cream or something, I bought boxes of matches and I hid in the garden and I struck every one and put my finger in to see how hot was the fire. And I realized as a little girl that I needed to be a good girl. I needed to repent all the time from my sins. I needed to believe. I needed to do all of this Christian stuff so that I shouldn't burn for eternity. Now here I am, 24 years old, ordained, completely given my life over to the church. And I wonder, maybe I'm so obsessed still in the recess of my mind and emotion with this childhood fear. I'm afraid not to believe it, but maybe it's not true. I don't know why. Only I think obviously it was my Jewish neshama, my soul, because the next thought I said to myself was, there has to be a God. And if there is a God, it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I told myself that day in that church, Abraham's God, that's the God I have to find. And from that moment on, I never, ever again prayed to the Christian God. On my knees in that church, in that place of surrounded with idols, I knelt down and I prayed to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. If only you could hear me now, please hear me and help me to find you. Help me to find the way of truth. I never stopped praying that prayer. I prayed it all day, every day, for over a year. It was Pesach 1981, 40 years ago. 40 years ago, actually, this, Linda, is a very, very special time for me. And I'm very excited to be speaking to you all now because this is exactly the time that I ran away from the church. It was like a little bit less than 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. How did it all happen? Was we had Pesach 1981 was just like this year. By the way, is it too late? Do you want to stop, Linda?
First of all, that the thing that you have just told us is so amazing about the day, 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. Mina Shamayim, everything. Okay, we have like, it's still long.
How many more minutes? Have we gone? No more minutes?
I love the story. How much minutes do you need to finish?
I want to just tell you, because you told me to speak slowly.
I know,
so
I know.
you have to give me a few more minutes because I'm speaking very slowly. So
for you to try to finish at 9 for you 5:30.
Okay. All right. So what time is it by you? I have 15 minutes.
Yes,
it will go very quickly. I have to tell you, well, they have to get the book.
Yeah,
Did you show them the book? Because it's almost 400 pages. I can't tell 400 pages.
I understand.
So let's just tell quickly, okay? So it was Pesach 1981, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he asked his emissaries the world over to print a leaflet explaining the laws of Passover for that particular year, that Jews should not innocently come to make a mistake. Why? Because Passover, like this year's, was on Motzei Shabbat. So when Passover is, the Seder night is Motzei Shabbat, so it's a little bit more difficult and complicated. Okay, we had an international convention because also like this year, the last days of Pesach was the Goyish holiday of Easter. So we were having an international convention in the church, and we had missionaries coming from all over the world. Unfortunately, there are many missionaries that want to convert Jews. There was a group of missionaries coming from Oslo in Norway. They were very well disguised. They knew to cover their heads. They wear tzitzit. They knew a lot of Hebrew. They'd befriended a Jew, a real Jew in Norway, and he gave them innocently. They told him, we are going to England to keep the Passover. They were coming to the church. He innocently gave them the address of the Babbage headquarters in London, and they went out of their way and they picked up some of these leaflets that the Rebbe had asked to bring out, and they brought them back to the church. And everyone was laughing because these little Norwegian Christians had managed to fool Orthodox Jews. Okay, cut a very long story short. I managed to secretly get my hands onto one of these leaflets and I hid it under my mattress. From that leaflet, there was an address at the bottom. I managed to write to Lubavitch headquarters in London, and that's how the whole story of my great escape from the church happened. It was at this time I was lying in my bed. There's a lot of things missing, but I just want to tell you that.
So I prefer a little bit slower, even if it take a little bit longer.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want you to know that the day I managed to get in touch with the rabbi secretly through the leaflet, and it was Rabbi Shmuel Arkush from Birmingham in England. And he suggested to me, he said, listen, you're 25 years old. You don't know anything about Jews whatsoever. You've never experienced a Shabbat. You don't know anything about the Jewish customs or holidays. Why don't you allow me to find a Jewish family, either in Manchester or in London, and you can stay for 2 weeks and observe and see what Jews are all about. And I looked at him and I said, Rabbi, 2 weeks? Don't you know how hard it was for me to get a half an hour to try to talk to you without anyone knowing? He said, well, don't you have any holiday? I said, no holiday. He said, well, I said, I have to give an account of every moment of my day. And he jumped up and he was very excited and he said, that's it. How about having a mad moment? Just disappear. And I told him, Rabbi, I can't just do that. What do you think? I'm just going to go to disappear and go to Jews, Orthodox Jews, for 2 weeks? And then what? Come back to the church and say, well, here I am. I came back now. What do you think? They're going to welcome me with open arms? I told him, Rabbi, it's going to take me an awful lot to repent for that one. So he told me, listen, I won't leave you on the street. If this church won't take you back, I'll find another church for you. Okay, fast forward. Anyway, I told him, Rabbi, I'm sorry, I cannot do this. And I went back to the church. But just spending half an hour, Linda, with that rabbi, a shliach of the Rebbe, was enough to catch onto my soul and give it the strength that it needed. But I was so confused. And I remember I prayed to God, can't you give me a word, a thought, something that will help me to know what is the right way? Is it Judaism or is it Christianity? And when I was walking to the administrative offices where I worked in the church, I was designing all the literature and writing articles, these words came to me so strongly: seek peace and pursue it. I knew it was a verse from the Psalms, from Tehillim. As soon as I got to my office, I took down my concordance and I looked it up. And the beginning of the verse is, depart from evil and do good, seek peace and pursue it. I actually confused myself because then I didn't know what was the evil, but these were the words that God gave me, was seek peace and pursue it. It was the next weekend that I was on the roster to preach the main sermon. And no matter what I thought, there was nothing anymore. I knew I could not again stand at the pulpit and preach. And I said, it was a Saturday morning, Shabbat morning. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. And I lay in my bed, my roommates were asleep. And I said to myself, if I have to leave, or if I'm going to leave, it's now. My family, my friends, every single person on earth I knew was a devout Christian. I did not expect the rabbi to take me in. It was understood that I should give him a prior warning. And anyway, he told me, you can call me any time of the day or night, but not on Friday night or Saturday. I thought I had to wait till Sunday morning. The only place I could think to hide was in the huge factory, which is what I did in a top attic room. I just want you to know, on that day, I felt like I was literally smothered by a heavy blackness that was pressing down on me. And I knew that I would take the risk and I would find my way. I didn't expect the rabbi, as I said, to take me in. And I remember before I left, I looked out of my window and I said to myself, if I have to sleep in the gutter, I honestly thought I would sleep on the street. If I have to do any kind of menial task, I will do it in order to find the one and only true God. I don't have time to go into the details because I want to share with you two very, very special stories. I ended up staying with a beautiful Jewish family in London, Chabad family, Dr. Weinbaum family. They were living in Hampstead Garden suburbs. They have 7 children. The eldest was only 8. Beautiful, beautiful family. And they graciously allowed me to stay and were so kind and unbelievable. When it came to the first Shabbat, first Friday, so they say that it's a custom for Jewish girls to light a candle. They said, no pressure. We understand it's very new and strange, but we'll put a candle out. If you would like to light, it's fine. And if not, we fully understand. Take your time. Okay, middle of the day, the telephone rang. It was the rabbi. He said he felt it was fair to tell me that the principal of the college managed to connect with him. I don't have time to go into it. It's in the book. So he said, the principal is begging me to send you back. He wants you to know that they love you. They care about you. They realize you're having a difficult time spiritually. They will help you. They want you back. You can go back for 2 weeks with no questions asked and take your position back as before. The rabbi said, I told him that I thought you needed a little more time to think things over. He asked, was it okay? I said yes, and I put down the phone. But Linda, I cannot tell you, I got so scared at that moment and I figured, oh gosh, what have I done? I've thrown away 25 years of my life that I worked so hard for. And for what? I said, that's it. I'm not going to light the candle. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to stay in my room. I spent all my money to get down there. It was Hashgacha Pratis that my mother had sent me a letter a week before I ran away. She'd given me a present of £5. Instead of turning it into the church like I was supposed to, I hid it in my drawer. With that little bit of money, I got a bus to go to the rabbi in Birmingham. And then I didn't have any money. So I figured I'll hitch a ride, I'll thumb a lift. It was a 4-hour drive back to the church, but I figured I'll find my way. I lay down on my bed and after about an hour, I calmed down and I said to myself, you know what, you're here already. This is a perfect opportunity that you've been needing all of these years. Just do whatever it is that they tell you to do. You'll experience everything firsthand and you'll prove to yourself there's absolutely nothing in it and you can forget about Jews forever. And I figured, what a good idea. Okay, I'm more relaxed. I come back downstairs. This nice lady asked me, would you like to take a shower? Would you like to wash your hair? I told her it's okay. I don't mind to help you more. In my mind, I was thinking when Shabbat comes in, I'll take a nice hot bath and shower, everything. I didn't say what I was thinking. She must have asked me at least a half a dozen times, 6, 8 times. Please, the bathroom is free. There's plenty of hot water. How about now? And I kept telling her, it's all right. I don't mind to help you. The house was all sparkling. We got the children all bathed and in their Shabbat clothes. She looked beautiful. And she made an announcement, children, it's time to light the Shabbat candles. I told myself, I don't think much of this. Isn't this a religious home? And isn't this the holy Sabbath? Aren't we going to do something holy now? Well, if we're going to do something holy in the church, we would kneel down, we would play soft music, we would work up an atmosphere, get into it. But the house was so hectic. Everyone was calling to the other one, turn these lights on, turn these lights off, put away car keys, cover telephones, all these last minute things. The children were dragging chairs into the dining room. They're so excited. Who will say the blessing for me to repeat after them? Okay. They give me a match. They tell me to light the candle. Tell me to wave my hands 3 times. I'm very embarrassed. Go like this. Then they tell me to repeat the words after one of the children. I repeat the words and she tells me, good Shabbos. I said, oh, Shabbos. Well, finally, is it all right if I take a bath and wash my hair now? She said, I'm so sorry. She said, you see, I asked you so many times before, because on Shabbat we don't take a bath or a shower and wash our hair. And we do it before and we do it after, but during Shabbat we don't do these things. And I'm so sorry, but it's too late. She said, it's all my fault. I should have explained it better. Please, please forgive me. But you cannot take a bath or a shower now or wash your hair. All I could think was my father telling me, what, they're going to take me to the synagogue looking like this tomorrow? It's not my fault. I've been helping her all day. I've been working hard to help her. I need to take a shower and wash myself and wash my hair. I was so frustrated. I said to myself, I am still going to take a shower and wash my hair. I was extremely frustrated. Okay, I go stumping up the stairs, 3 flights of stairs. My little room was on top of the house, and I opened the door to my room. I was just about to barge in, because that's what you do when you're really frustrated, right? I'm telling you, there was such a peace in that room. It was so thick, you could almost touch it. And all I could say was, I jumped back and I told myself, whoa, God is here. Instinctively within myself, I knew at that moment that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God I tried so hard to find, he was here in this home with these people. I stood on the landing and I realized the entire house was filled with this peace. But where did it come from? Nobody made it. One moment the house was so hectic, and the next moment, such an intense peace. I said to myself, I only lit a candle. But the amazing thing is what I was telling you earlier in the talk. For the first time in my life, I connected with God as a Jew. When I took that little match and I lit that little candle, I want you to understand something very, very important. I did not believe it. I did not think about it. I certainly didn't try to arouse any spiritual feelings and fervor. I was determined to prove to myself there is nothing in this. But what happened? What happened? The very act of doing the mitzvah. In this mitzvah I did was I took that little match and I lit that little candle at the designated time on Shabbat. But whether we put a coin in a charity box, whether we choose to eat a little kosher candy bar or kosher food, or whether we learn a pasuk, a verse in the Torah, or we learn something from the Torah, something magnificent happens to a Jew. The deepest little Pintele Yid, that little tiny Jewish spark, it connects with the most holy part of God, one-on-one. And I want you to understand something amazing too, because in the church, everything was in belief. If you didn't believe, you would never have an experience. And I was determined when I came into this Jewish home and started to learn of Torah, no one would ever force me to believe in anything again. Never. And I have never had to force myself to believe anything about Judaism. Because when a Jew does a little mitzvah, there's a fringe benefit. It comes with a present. It's the gift of emunah. It's the gift of faith. One little mitzvah will give us back emunah. We don't need to conjure it up from within us. It's a present from the mitzvah. My last story to tell you is a story of my mom. I just tell you quickly, when I was 18, she was realized she had cancer. She was diagnosed with cancer, the same cancer her mother had at the same age, 46 years old. And she was rushed into hospital. She had 2 massive heart attacks during the surgery. And the 8 doctors worked on her throughout the night, throughout the surgery. And they told my father the next day, please do not even thank us. Medically speaking, it was too many things went wrong and it was a miracle. Okay, my mother fully recovered. The only thing she asked after that surgery was to be called of her Hebrew name, Sarah. She was known in the church as Sister Sarah until the day she died. Now, I want to tell you, 7 years later, 9 years altogether, I left and ran away from the college. I spent 9 months with the family in England. Then I knew I wanted to build a Jewish home, a kosher home, and I wanted to do it properly. I came here to Eretz Israel to learn Torah. I'm working in a school now where I learned. So then I met my husband a year and a half later. He has an amazing story of his own. He's actually a convert to Judaism. He was raised in the Episcopalian Church in America, in Sacramento, in California. He had his own journey. Anyway, someone knew him and they put us together on a shidduch and we decided to get married. Now, I know this sounds a little bit strange, but I knew that it was better that I got married and I didn't tell my parents, because it would be so painful and so hard for my father that it would just not be good for him. So I got married, and later, only when I was pregnant with our first child, I told my husband, okay, now we have to tell them that we got married. Okay, so anyway, so my parents came. My father was very, very upset about all of this. He was really, really disturbed that I did. My father told me not to get married and everything, and that's what I did in the church. And so now he was really, really hurt and really upset. So anyway, they came to Israel to see who I married. And my husband was sitting with my father, Baruch Hashem, very cordial conversation in our living room, and I went into the kitchen to make food. And my mom whispered, she came in and whispered to me, and she said, Tova, do you know what prayer I said when I was on the operating table? At this time, my mother had been married to my father for 40 years. She'd been baptized into the church. She was the preacher's wife. She sat in church almost every night of the week. She had never said one word ever of anything Jewish. And I looked at my mother and I said, Mommy, I don't know. I do not know what prayer you chose to say. And she whispered, I said Shema. Because when it came down to an issue of life and death, when my mom was lying there on that operating table, there was 2 things she knew. She knew who she was, who she really was, and she knew who was her God. And that's a story I want to leave you all with. And we know at this time of the year, in the month, the Jewish month of Elul, that God is particularly close to all of us. He's approachable now more than any time in the year. And I just want to encourage every one of you, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to wake up your own little Jewish neshama and to connect with the divine, with God in his most holy essence by doing one little mitzvah. Don't feel it's a trap. I'll do one thing, then there'll be something else. Do one thing consistently, and you will see how you will synchronize a part of your soul, body, soul, and mind with God. And there's just a fringe benefit too. Remember I told you, it wasn't that I just wanted to connect with God in a selfish way. I wanted to make this world a better place. Well, in Kabbalah, we learn that Jews believe this physical world is a gift from God. we need to use it because hidden inside of it is a divine spark, many divine sparks. And when we take this physical world, a little glass of water that we said a bracha on, a food that we say a bracha, a little wax candle that we light, a little coin, we put it in the charity box, that little spark of divinity that is hidden within the physical matter is released, and it is making this world slowly, slowly, Jews, our purpose is to synchronize heaven with earth, to make this lowest dwelling a comfortable place for the divine, for God to live. And this will be the time of Mashiach. A non-Jew, his job is to preserve the world. He has 7 mitzvot. He is not allowed to destroy the world. A Jew, it's our job to change the world. May God help us that we will fulfill our mission. And I want to wish you all a Shana Tova. Maybe be written and sealed for a year of blessing, for a year of awakening, for a year of connection with ourself, with the divine, with God. God bless.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Linda.
First of all, I want to thank you for the
I
time.
can't hear you well. Can you put it up? Why don't I hear you?
Yes. First of all, I want to tell you, thank you so much for the timing. For everybody to know, she's in Israel. She started this speech at 4 a.m. Baruch Hashem. So thank you so much. Your story, it's amazing. I was like, I couldn't stop hearing, you know, it's every detail. And I cannot imagine if you are so you were so strength with all that church stuff. I can't imagine what kind of Jew, Baruch Hashem, you are. I can't imagine all this.
I'm not such a, I have to tell you, I'm not the best. Don't worry. I'm not some saying.
I don't know if you're the best, but you are one of the best of Hashem. I'm sure about it. So your story, it's amazing. I want to tell everybody that the name of the book, it's praying, it's just playing with fire, right?
Do play with fire.
Play with fire.
I sent you a copy of the book. Maybe you could put it on the link. Anybody who doesn't, many people that don't speak English for the first language said it was the first book that they read in English, and it was very good. It's very good English, and it's a very good read.
Baruch Hashem. And they're asking you what happened with the family now, with your family, your siblings, your mom.
Yes. Well, both of my parents passed away. Unfortunately, I tried to get my mom to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, but my father wouldn't allow. And so the only sibling that I have alive now is my sister Margaret. Remember, I was the youngest of the family. I'm actually a granny, and I have 6 grandchildren, Baruch Hashem. So I'm already 65. So my older sister, she's over 70. My sister Margaret, she consistently believes that I'm stark raving mad, and she thinks that it was too hard in the college and I just lost my mind. And she always tells me it's such a pity because you're such a nice person, and why did you let everything get to you like that? But I want to tell you that every year I send her a Jewish calendar. I always used to send to my mom. And in the beginning, she never said anything. But then in time, when I would call her and tell her, Mommy, it's going to be Yom Kippur, and she would say, yes, I know it's going to be Yom Kippur, love. I have the calendar and it's right by my bed and it reminds me. And so I always sent to my sister also, and she never said anything. And I also always sent her Shmura Matzah on Pesach. So this last Pesach was COVID, and the Chabad in London, who's run by the oldest daughter who was in the family where I was that took me, and she was just 8. But anyway, so she's Rabbi Rebbitzin there. So she had advertised Seder in a box. So it was everything that you need for the Seder, and it would be delivered and everything. So I told her, listen, you can't send the charoses and egg and all this stuff, but at least send the Seder plate. I tell her, I'll pay anything you need. And my sister lives in a very remote part of England, obviously with no Jews. They took over my father's church, her and her husband. She's married to a Christian. But do you know, she wrote to me and a WhatsApp, and she never ever like corresponds with me or anything. And she told me, she sent me a picture. She put everything Jewish that she had on the table, like anyone had given her, or sent. She had a menorah, she had the Seder plate, she had it all together on the same table. And this is my Jewish department. I put it all out, and it's so nice. And then her husband asked her what did she want to do for her 75th birthday, and she said, she only wants to go to Israel, but unfortunately she's not able to come yet because of the COVID, but she told me, don't worry, I am going to come. So you never know when or how the Pinter Yid will wake up. And but if I have 1 minute, you asked about my father and my life. My father, if you had asked me what was the hardest in all of this, I would definitely tell you that it was that I had to hurt my father so deeply. He was a very good person and a very sincere person, and he helped tremendously and did an unbelievable chesed. So when he passed away, I always wondered, what did God do with him? Because he didn't choose to convert to Judaism and everything. And okay, so God, we know that God is just and kind, and he rewards every person for good deeds that we do. Anyway, 3 weeks after my father, pardon?
Sorry.
3 weeks after my father passed away, and I have to tell you, I'm not a person that remembers dreams. Obviously we all dream. Scientists say everybody dreams, but I'm not a person that I remember my dreams. But I remember I heard my father. I did not see him. I just heard him so clearly. And he was yelling at me like when I was a little girl. And he would tell me, that's it. After everything you put me through, that's the best Jew that you could be. He told me, get it together, girl. My father was soldier. Remember, it's like no nonsense. You feel sick, you go to school anyway. You feel whatever, you just do what you have to do. Get it together. And I have to tell you, Linda, that I am a better Jew since my father passed away. I think when you grow up in such a controlled, closed environment and very rigid like that, that finally, when I came to Judaism, so I was also very much like this. And then you learn to color out of the line a little bit, and then you can get used to even scribble, So I have to tell you that it was a little bit of a wake up for when my father came to me, that yes, I have to do better and get back into coloring in the lines a little better. And yeah.
And I want to tell you something. What big marriage, huge marriage of Uncle Sam.
I just don't know how to make this louder. I can't hear you. Okay.
I'm telling you about Uncle Sam. What a marriage.
Oh, yes. I'm very close.
Baruch Hashem. And you never know what a mitzvah can do. You're sending your,
I know.
You're sending your, ¿cómo se dice? Su hermana. Your sister. You're sending your sister a matzah, and you never know if the matzah that you're sending brings you back to daddy. So Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. We are really inspired with your story. It's amazing. And I know you told us that it's full of more details and more inspiration. So I would like to read your book, if you can put where we can buy it. It's
maybe we can translate it to Spanish one of these days.
They're asking for it. maybe we can translate it to Spanish. And I think I have a person that can, maybe we can do this.
Really, I think it's very good. In fact, I just was at my cousin's son's levaya, and one of the relatives said, "Why do you only have it in English and Hebrew? You need it. Why don't you have it in Spanish or French?" He just told me. So, if you know someone, more than happy, and we should meet more people. I just want to say that the Frierdiker Rebbe was here in Sfat, and in the 1920s, and someone asked him, "How do we see God?" He is a tzaddik, he sees God, but how do you and I see God? And he answered, through hashgacha pratis, through divine providence. And what I really shared with you and what is in the book more is just divine providence, but we all have divine providence. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, the more you look for it, the more you will see it. And I think it's important in these days because it brings us to a higher level of emunah, the level of knowing. When we see something, we know it. And that when we see hashgacha pratis, we will know God. And this was my favorite pasuk from the Nevi'im. When I was a little girl, I learned it by heart at a very young age. They will teach it's a pasuk of Mashiach. They will teach no more any man his neighbor or his brother to say, "Do you know God?" For they will all know him from the least to the greatest. And this is how we will come to this era of Mashiach, by mitzvot and Torah, and to know God. God bless.
Thank you so much. God bless you. God bless your family. And we hope we have soon the story of your sister, Bezrat Hashem, coming back.
Yes, we have many stories. So God bless and wish everyone Shana Tova. And like I said, it should be a year of blessing for all.
Amen. And thank you for the time and for your Mesirut Nefesh for this.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. If anybody wants to be in touch, you have my email.
Okay. No, I don't have your email. I just have your WhatsApp.
I will send it to you in the WhatsApp. Please post it, but you have my WhatsApp.
You can put it now. We can put it now in the chat. It's better, so we can put it to everyone.
So it's family.
Yeah.
Family Mordecai without an H, MORDECAI. Family Mordecai @gmail.com.
Like more day. A ver, no sé si lo puse. One sec. Gmail. Okay. Thank you so much.
Gmail.
Thank you so much.
Family Mordecai @gmail.com.
Okay, thank you so much.
I love to hear from everyone. And when we get through this crazy situation, if anyone is in Israel, you have my number. Please share it, and they're welcome to come and visit. Please.
Thank you so much. You're a great tzaddiket. May Hashem bless you and your family.
Okay,
thank you
God
so much.
bless.
And good morning to you. Have a great
Yes, that's it. I'm staying up now. I'm going to bake.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
Very nice.
It was
Love to
nice.
everyone.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bueno, y ahora sí voy en español. A todos ustedes, muchísimas
I
gracias.
don't know how I don't leave. The leave button doesn't work.
Muchísimas gracias a todos.
I'm pressing leave and it's not leaving.
Me está pidiendo quitar. Bueno, la semana pasada que no dije que si viene el Mashiach o no viene el Mashiach, nos vamos a ver. Si no llega el Mashiach y no hay ninguna cosa en el Inter, nos vemos la siguiente semana con otra historia impresionante. Muchísimas gracias por su atención. Creo que valió la pena que dure más esta historia porque fue espectacular. Muchísimas gracias, buenas noches y Shabbat Mevorach.